Once again, the Doctor Who rumour mill is going absolutely wild. To very little surprise, it's being reported by a load of sources that David Tennant is going to come back to the show, and David Tennant needs to be back to save the show, and all of that stuff that we've heard 100 times. But I want to share my thoughts on this because I genuinely believe that if David Tennant does return to the show, whether that be as the 16th Doctor or as the by-generation 14th Doctor, I think there's a real possibility that it would permanently end the show. Forever. Taken off air. Not a hiatus. End the show. But before we get on to my thoughts on why bringing back David Tennant would be a genuinely terrible idea, and we read through and break down the articles and the betting odds for the new Doctor, because it's not just David Tennant being rumoured, there's a lot of other actors whose names are being thrown around as the 16th Doctor. But before we get to that, I'll run you through a quick few headlines of Doctor Who in the past couple of days. As ever, I'd like to remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe, like, share, etc. This channel is where you can get all of your Doctor Who news, reviews, fan films, and a load of other stuff. You can also support me on Patreon. Any help is greatly appreciated. We have an air date for Doctor Who Season 2, which is bizarre because it had absolutely no fanfare or pizzazz or a new trailer. It just sort of dropped. But it appears to have dropped by accident. In this article from The Express, it states that Doctor Who fans were left baffled over random announcement on new BBC series. It dropped in the middle of like a rugby thing, and because no Doctor Who fans watch sport, obviously there's a couple that do, probably about 2, but no one really picked up on it till about midnight a couple of days ago. Then it started getting spread all over Twitter. The BBC have yet to officially announce it, but this trailer was leaked. I say leaked, it's a trailer we've seen before, just slightly re-edited, with the date of April 12th at the end. We don't actually know whether it's still doing the midnight drop thing. I think it's not a great plan if they do keep doing that. I mean, for me personally, it works. I'm always awake at midnight and it gives me time to work on a review overnight, ready to upload the next morning. So from a personal perspective, the midnight drop's great. But I think in terms of everybody else on the planet, it's terrible. We also got some new casting announcements. Christopher Chung joins the Whoniverse. Will he be an ally or an enemy? We've got some vague comments from Russell T Davies and just the usual, oh, it's an honour to be in Doctor Who. I don't personally know this actor, but I'm excited. It looks cool. Sure, we don't really know anything. A bit random that they dropped this, but nice. Anyway, where did this David Tennant coming back to Doctor Who nonsense start from? The earliest I can find that's not from about 2010, because the amount of headlines going, David Tennant returns to Doctor Who, which he did for the 60th and for the 50th. But point is, in recent memory, The Standard reported that David Tennant tipped for Doctor Who return amid reports of Ncuti Gatwa's exit. The reports come as Russell T Davies revealed that he's developing a brand new series, sparking concerns about his future involvement with the sci-fi show. To give you a little bit of background, if you want the full breakdown, I have got a video about this already up on my channel. But basically the current rumour mill is saying that Ncuti Gatwa, not because of woke, let's ignore the word woke, but Ncuti Gatwa is going to move on from Doctor Who after Season 2. We know for a fact that they did a couple of weeks of reshoots, and apparently that's when he's filmed his regeneration, or at least an open-ended possible goodbye to the 15th Doctor. Which means, unless the show gets cancelled, which is also being reported, but I don't believe, I mean, go and watch my video for my full thoughts, I don't believe the show's getting cancelled. But I do think within the next year or so, we could see the announcement of the 16th Doctor. I think this standard thing, it's just to generate headlines. David Tennant's not the 16th Doctor, let's be real. Now, what I found interesting as well, not only is it being reported that that's happening, there's a lot of articles like these two here, which are claiming that the way to save Doctor Who is to bring back David Tennant. And I just want to voice my opinion on the fact that that's so completely and utterly wrong. Obviously, I'm going to read this article and give their take a fair look. But I just think it's worth saying right away, sure, I reckon in terms of viewing figures, the show's viewing figures would go up. I think in a way it would be a very short-term, fantastic solution. Doctor Who would get talked about, lots of people would watch, but it would kill the longevity of Doctor Who. We cannot just keep relying on bringing David Tennant back. There needs to be a new era with a new Doctor that feels wildly different from everything that's come before, who will be the sort of standout. Like classic era, you had Tom Baker. Whenever the show was in trouble, fans would cry, bring back Tom Baker. I mean, they brought back Patrick Troughton for the two Doctors when viewing figures were starting to dip. So it's not like this idea of bringing back a classic Doctor is a recent one. And it does, I see why it makes sense. But the problem is, we've already used the David Tennant trick. For the 50th, it was cool. It's a multi-Doctor story. But for the 60th, I think that even that was kind of drawing the line. Obviously, as a fan of the 10th Doctor, I'm never going to complain. I personally would love to see more of David Tennant as the Doctor. But I think the problem is it doesn't build up new fans. It doesn't set up the show to live forever. If you have to keep coming back to David Tennant every single time the show's starting to dip in popularity, when David Tennant does eventually leave, the show will go off air. It almost happened back in 2009. When David Tennant said he was going to leave and Russell T Davies was going to leave, there was a point where the BBC weren't even going to continue Doctor Who because they thought, without David Tennant, without Russell T Davies, the show just won't be popular. And thankfully, Stephen Moffat came along and absolutely proved them wrong. Doctor Who can survive, it just needs to feel fresh, it needs to feel new. Especially in the TV climate we're in at the moment, I think do away with the 45-minute episodes, do away with the 8-episode seasons, completely freshen it up, something new. Look how vastly different Classic Who is to New Who. There's been so many years since New Who began. We're not in the days of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, 45-minute individual Monster of the Week stories anymore. I think we need something fresh. But anyway, let's see why Fran Winston believes David Tennant is the one and only way to save Doctor Who. Already I've seen the word woke in this article, and sure, it's a quote from the Sun article, but also... She talks here about the fact that the BBC is known for making rash decisions when it comes to Doctor Who, which is true. And if they brought David Tennant back, that would be one of the biggest rash, panic, rush decisions of all time. Because also, I feel like it kind of screams desperation. We had him back for the 60th, and the whole bi-generation thing, like, the point of that is, let's park the New Who David Tennant Doctor, like, that chapter's done, Ncuti is the new, we're going into a new territory. Now, sure, sadly, the new territory, season 1, hasn't been received that well by fans, or the general public for that matter, but that's not because it's not David Tennant. That's because of some of the choices, controversial putting your main villain on a dog leash and dressing up Ruby's mum like she's in The Traitors. But we won't dwell on Empire of Death. In this case, though, there would appear to be a simple fix. Bring back the hugely popular David Tennant once again. No. I've already made my opinion clear, but just the words hugely popular David Tennant, that's kind of the problem. Like, we're not doing anything new here. It's just more of David... There's loads of David Tennant Doctor Who. Go and watch that. Now, one of the things that sparked this article is that the betting odds are currently 5-1 on David Tennant reprising the role. There is an entire list of other British actors who they think possibly are going to take on the role. We'll come to that in a moment, though. But they talk here about the whole bi-generation concept and the fact that David's 14th Doctor is known to be alive and well, living a quiet life with Donna Noble. So I think the closest we could come to a David Tennant return is not him being the Doctor, but as I mentioned earlier, like in the story The Two Doctors, maybe you get Ncuti or whoever the new Doctor is to pop in on David Tennant to just get a bit of a viewing figure spike, which wouldn't be as bad as having him as the main Doctor, but it also wouldn't be good. As I say, you can't just rely on David Tennant to bring in your viewing figures. They do point out here the sharp contrast in viewing figures, but also the way they compare the viewing figures here is just it's not really fair, because they point out that Ncuti's season gained between 2.5 million and 3.18 million, whereas the highest rated Tenant episode, which they don't say was the highest rated Tenant episode here, they just act as if this was a generic episode for Tenant, was 13.31 million people. But 1, that was a Christmas special. 2, that had Kylie Minogue. 3, that was at the peak of Doctor Who's popularity. 4, that was back in an age where streaming and all that jazz didn't really exist. I think it was possibly like the year before iPlayer even came into existence. And also, the way we consume media now isn't overnight viewing figures. It's like a binge streaming model. And also, as I say, 13.31 million was the highest the Tennant era got. The average is probably more around the 10 million mark, which is still a very big difference. A fairer point of comparison, as the article goes on to compare, is the viewing figures for the 60th anniversary. But once again, I think they're using like the monthly consolidated figures here, averaging 8.19 million viewers per episode, because I remember the Star Beasts overnight was like 5 million or something, which is still higher than 2 or 3 million. But yeah, I think the way they've articulated the viewing figures here is a little bit fishy. But despite the fishiness of this, it's undeniable that the new era isn't pulling in the viewing figures that anyone wants, really. It's a shame, and I do think, I talked about it at the start of this video, the midnight drop works personally for me, but I do think it's just baffled everyone as to when to actually watch Doctor Who. It doesn't feel like an event, there's a lot of spoilers online, and if word of mouth spreads that the finale's underwhelming, people just don't care. Anyway, they also go on to have this little list of other actors who are going to potentially replace Ncuti Gatwa. Josh O'Connor sits at a 2-to-1 betting odds thing, Jack Lowden at 4-to-1, David Tennant 5-to-1, Richard Armitage 7-to-1, and Leo Woodall 8-to-1. Look, I don't really know any of these actors, so it's tricky to comment, but this kind of feels like a list from many, many years back. Like, they're all just white guys. I personally am really here for seeing another female Doctor. I think that could freshen up the show, bring a new perspective. Like, if we are gonna do another... Like, the trouble is you can't keep doing reboot after reboot after reboot, but let's say 16th Doctor we're going to have after Ncuti, I think a female Doctor would probably be the best option. And if it's still Russell writing, I'd be here for someone like Lydia West, maybe. I made a video on what I'd do if I was showrunner years ago, and I cast her as the companion. I also still stand by, I think he's too much of a big name now, especially after Monkey Man this year. But Dev Patel would be... He's my #1 pick for a new Doctor, like, genuinely. I think he is too famous. And I think with the show's current state, he probably wouldn't be on board. But if they ever did Doctor Who movies, again, Dev Patel's your man. Let me know in the comments who you think would make a fantastic 16th Doctor, because there's a whole host of British actors who do genuinely brilliantly in the role. I do kind of hope that Ncuti isn't leaving after season 2 though, because I want to see more from his Doctor. He was half absent for series 1, and there's reportedly going to be another like Doctor Light episode in series 2. Give us more of that, Ncuti Doctor. Anyway, that does bring us to the end of today's video. As ever, if you did enjoy, please do remember to like, comment, subscribe. Patreon links in the description. Yeah, let me know your thoughts on all this in the comments down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.